The next day, I spoke with the chair of the Ohio Democratic Party, Liz Walters. So it's widely acknowledged that Kamala Harris had a great performance at the debate, especially with the expectations from Biden's debate in June. While she did land several punches on Donald Trump and clearly rattled him a few times, she also did not answer a few of the questions. Is that concerning since voters are still getting to know her and her positions?
Let me start by agreeing with your premise that Kamala Harris won that debate this week. And I think more importantly, with all the questions and the totality of the debate performance in clear view, what we know is that we had a clear contrast. And for any undecided voter or voter who was turning in to decide, to figure out who they might be leaning towards, you couldn't have had a clearer choice. On one side, you had a career prosecutor who laid out her vision for the country and came to the table with ideas for how to help working families here in Ohio. And then a 34-time convicted felon who couldn't form a coherent thought about a policy or a priority had that would actually benefit the voters. And so for anyone who came to that debate with questions, for the entirety of the 2 hours, one person could present policy ideas and priorities, and the other person ranted and raved at the sky.
There are some comparisons, interestingly, Harris's stance to Ronald Reagan, of all people, when it comes to foreign policy in particular, and especially as the Republican Party has moved further to the right. Is that a problem, though, for more left-leaning members of the Democratic coalition, especially when you start talking about the Israel-Hamas war?
I think that what you've seen with Vice President Harris is that she has united the Democratic Party full stop. The full spectrum and coalition of voters who want to see her in office, it includes people from the farther sides of our party, but also a whole host of independents and undecided voters, or even kind of left of center voters. Plenty of room in our tent for Nikki Haley voters who do not want to see an isolationist president or a president who buddies up to dictators like Donald Trump back in office. And so while within the Democratic Party, because it's a big tent, we don't always have full alignment on all issues. Right now, you can know for sure that the Democratic Party is fully aligned behind Vice President Harris.
The last time we talked was at the statewide gathering of Democrats in Columbus, and there was obviously a focus by the folks there and you that the U.S. Senate race was the priority. That pretty much it was acknowledged that Donald Trump is likely going to win Ohio. This doesn't change that significantly, does it?
Well, listen, I think the race is greatly different in Ohio on the presidential side. Vice President Harris and Governor Walz have unique messaging that speaks directly to Ohio voters, and we're seeing those numbers shift substantially compared to where the head-to-head was between President Biden and former President Trump. But the reality is, right, we're not sure that they'll compete for Ohio meaningfully. Either candidate doesn't seem to be spending a lot. As any Ohio voter with a TV knows, you're hearing a lot about the Senate race. And so our assignment hasn't changed. We continue to remain focused on making sure that the man who works hardest for Ohioans, Sherrod Brown, goes back to the Senate this November.
Let's talk about that race. The contest was expected to be expensive and close, and it sure is. There's a belief that the shakeup on the Democratic ticket does help Sherrod Brown, even with Trump still on the ballot. But Republicans say that they're still going to try to tie Sherrod Brown to Joe Biden, that they're the same, essentially. Does that work against you?
I think that at the end of the day, this race has always been between Sherrod and Bernie. That's it. This race is about who's going to go into the U.S. Senate and fight for Ohioans every day, who's going to put our needs first, and who is going to stand up to the folks who don't have our best interest at heart. And at the end of the day, Ohio voters know that Sherrod Brown is on their side. He has stood up to corporate interests, to pharma, to railroad companies, and sometimes to his own party when he doesn't think that's what's right for Ohioans. And we know that's what's going to drive a lot of folks to the polls. So they can run whatever ads they want against Sherrod Brown, but I think most Ohio voters know who he is and what he stands for, and that he represents the values we want to see in the U.S. Senate.
57% of Ohioans voted last year to protect reproductive rights and abortion access. Marino says he's 100% pro-life, but has also said that vote came from cheating. He also says he supports the Republican Party platform, which would leave decisions related to abortion up to the states. Trump has been unclear on what he might do with the national abortion ban or any restrictions. Is this still going to be a key issue for Ohio voters this fall, or do they consider it settled because of last year's vote?
It is absolutely one of the top issues we are hearing about from voters, that we're seeing in polling, and that we know is going to matter to Ohio voters. You made an important point, right? Last year, Ohioans overwhelmingly voted to enshrine this right in our state constitution. They made their voices heard. And what we are seeing, that whether it is Dave Yost, Mike DeWine, Frank LaRose, Bernie Moreno, Donald Trump, they do not respect the voices of Ohio voters and continue to lean in on this issue to try and find ways and undermine the will of Ohioans. The choice on this issue couldn't be more clear. If you want elected officials who are going to respect the voice of the people in Ohio, especially on the issue of abortion, Sherrod Brown's your guy, and Democrats up and down the ticket are committed to having a pro-choice state. There is no room for debate there on that issue in our mind.
Bigger issue, though, than the economy or immigration?
You know, it all plays differently depending on who the voter is you're talking to. All of these things are important to folks, and it's an important reminder that family planning is an economic issue for millions of women in Ohio and for their husbands or their partners. Having children is an important decision. Your healthcare providers and services you can have, that's an important economic impact. And so I don't think this issue is disconnected and separate. It's a big issue that impacts so many aspects of the lives of Ohioans and women across the country.
Republicans have a 4-3 advantage on the Ohio Supreme Court. Democrats would have to win all 3 seats that are on this ballot to gain control of the court. And incumbent Justice Melody Stewart is being challenged by her Republican colleague Joe Deters. And it looks like it's an uphill battle for Democrats. And yet there are several abortion-related laws that are going to come before the court. You have 3, at least, members of the court who have said that they believe that life begins at conception. How do you, this is going to be rough for you to win.
It's a big fight, I will acknowledge that, but I don't think it's quite the uphill battle that everyone makes it out to be. When the issues are this clear and when the will of the voters is this disconnected from their elected officials, I think that argument is a little simpler for us to make. It doesn't make it less difficult, but the choice is clear. And I think on the Supreme Court races in particular, what we know for sure is that Ohio voters are sick of out-of-touch extreme politicians who don't listen to them. They are sick of nepotism and corruption guiding so much of Ohio state government. And it's worth noting that Joe Deters has publicly admitted that the only reason he got the appointment to the Supreme Court was because he had to promise the Republican Party to run against Melody Stewart. That's pretty shameful. But when all of these decisions are presented to voters and they have the opportunity to make a decision, we think that those choices are clear. And our job for the next 8 weeks is to make that case, which we're absolutely going to do.
On Thursday afternoon, Trump announced there would not be another debate, though Harris had said she wanted one.